Hello and welcome to this exploring session, and today we are completing our session on Tarlton's news out of Purgatory. Only such a jest as his jig, fit for gentlemen to laugh at an hour, published by an old companion of his, Robin Goodfellow. Last session we went through a little over half of the text. We're about to start the tale of the Vicar of Bergamo and why he sits with a coal in his mouth in Purgatory. But broadly speaking, it started off with an overarching narrative of someone being a bit sad about the death of Richard Tarlton, died a couple of years earlier than the printing of this text. Wanders off into a field and encounters Tarlton's ghost and goes, "Whoa, scary." And Tarlton says, "No, it's all right. I've not come from hell. I'm not a demon. I've been in purgatory since I died." And the other one goes, "Well, that's theologically tricky within a Protestant universe." And he says, "No, it's fine. It gives me an excuse to tell lots of stories," which he then does. And many of them nicked from other sources, though we haven't actually fully gone through and tried to figure out what's come from what and from where. Some of it may be original, but I suspect almost none of it is. But we don't really concern ourselves with that during these sessions. We're just trying to find out how fun it is and whether we can do something more with it further down the line, either as readings or performance, or adapt into something else. To continue this exploration of this text, we have in the room Greg. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Greg, and I'm from Stratford, England.
Liza, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Liza. I'm an actor, singer, and text coach to actors in London.
And Sascha, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Sascha Cooper, and I'm a professional performer, actor, writer, director based in Brighton who's going through her own purgatory. Look at these roots!
And I am your host, Robert Crighton. The closest I'm coming to purgatory in that sense is just this was all done with clippers and in my own time. I wouldn't say it's all even, but luckily I've kept the resolution rate on my camera very, very low, so you can't tell. I advise it. So I'm your host. I am also a storyteller, writer, performer, all sorts of stuff, and generally run the Beyond Shakespeare platform, I suppose we could call it, because we have videos, we have audio on a podcast which you can subscribe to and enjoy, and all sorts of material on the website as well. I should do more of these as a sort of introductory, subscribe now stuff. Not going to. So, without further ado, with our ordering system in place, Liza is going to kick off the tale of the Vicar of Bergamo. This is a discourse that's being told by Tarlton in Purgatory, which he is now relating to us.
In fact, Rob, shall we start from the paragraph just before, after I had heard?
That would be an excellent idea. If you do paragraph before, and then Greg will pick up on the actual tale itself.
After I had heard this discourse of the cook, I went on further to see if I could perceive any other such jests as might make me merry in so melancholic a place. At last, as I cast mine eye aside, I saw where a poor vicar sat with a coal in his mouth. I asked the reason why he was appointed to such punishment, and it was answered me thus.
Oh, all right, sorry, it's because there dwelled sometime in Bergamo a vicar that was, well, beloved in the town, for that he was a boon companion and would not stick to play at trump all day with his parishioners for a pot or two of ale. A fair reader he was, and pleased the people well, marry for his learning that was little, and tongues he had no more than were in his mouth. Neither would he trouble himself with the knowledge of many languages, but applied his idle time with time upon good fellowship.
It chanced that his school, growing very great, and much chalk upon his post, his hostess wanting money to pay the maltman, waxed hasty with the vicar for her debt. He then, being bare of wanting money to pay the milkman, waxed hasty with the vicar for her debt, he then bare of pence, because his quarterage was not come in, told her she could not have it as yet, whereupon they grew to words, and from words, blows. For Master Vicar went away with a broken head, which drove him into such a choler that he sought all means how to revenge, and he laid his plot thus.
Every Sunday morning afore Mass, all the youth of the parish did accustom to come to the alehouse to eat hot puddings, which was a great profit to the goodwife. Now, to prevent her of this commodity, the vicar spake against it, and forbade it openly. Yet it was not so deeply inveighed against, but that divers Sundays they would make her steal thither to breakfast. And one Sunday, amongst the rest, the whole crew being gathered together, notice was given to the vicar, whereupon he hied him thither, and sound them all hard at it by the teeth. There, when they saw Master Vicar come in, every man rose up and ran away to shift for himself. The hostess, she whipped him with her puddings, so that there was none left in the house but Master Vicar, who, spying a dozen of lusty large black puddings hanging in the chimney, whipped them into his wide sleeve and went his way.
He was no sooner gone, but the goodwife, coming out, missed her puddings, and little suspected the vicar, but thought some of her guests had carried them away, whereupon she told it to her husband, who let the matter pass lightly, and wished his wife to make her hastily ready that they might go to Mass. On goes she with her holiday partlet, and sponging herself up, went with her husband to church. Came just to the service. Well, Master Vicar, who was in a great chafe, mumbled up his matins, and after service was done, very stoutly got him into the pulpit, and began to fall to his collation. His text was upon the gospel for that day, which he so coursed and canvassed over that he fell at last to talk of the breakfast.
"Oh, neighbours," quoth he, "as I came this day to churchward, I came into a house, nay, into an alehouse, where I found a crew at breakfast before Mass, at a bloody breakfast, a black breakfast, yea, neighbours, the devil's breakfast." And with that he threw his arms about him with such violence that his wide sleeve untied, the puddings fell out, and hit an old wife on the head that she fell over again. The hostess, seeing her dozen of puddings that she missed, cried out to her husband, "Oh, man," quoth she, "there's the dozen of puddings that were gone out of the chimney. Hide thee lest they be gone." At this there was such a laughing and such a rumour that the poor vicar was fain to leave off his collation and come down to answer what the alewife objected against him. But he was so well beloved in the parish that the alewife was punished, and her Sunday breakfasts put down by a common consent of the churchwardens.
The vicar, thus well revenged of the alewife, endeavoured how to make amends to his parish, and therefore casting in his head how he might bring it to pass, one day, as he travelled towards Pisa, he met a stranger, who had certain feathers of his hand of a bird called Apis indica, which were long and large, of the colour of gold, and were so bright as scarce one could look against them. Such before were never seen in Italy.
Master Vicar, as soon as he saw these, had a reach in his head and jumped with the traveller to buy one. A price was pitched for 30 Julios, and Master Vicar paid it. Having this, home he came, and bought a case of crimson velvet embroidered with gold to put his feather in, keeping it with great curiosity and secrecy, making report that he had one of the richest relics in the world, and promising upon Candlemas Day next to show it, whereupon it was not only blazed abroad throughout the town, but in all the villages and hamlets adjoining, that both young and old prepared themselves to see this holy relic.
2 of the crew, who were brothers at the breakfast of puddings, hearing these news, sought how to be even with Master Vicar, and therefore brought it so to pass by a wench of the house where the vicar lay, that they might see the holy relic. She brought them to the chamber, and the box wherein the case lay in perfume. The fellow, looking in, and seeing a feather, neither respecting reason nor religion, took it out, and put it in his bosom, and filled the case full of charcoals that lay by, and so, putting the case into the box, kissed the wench, and went his way.
Service time being come, Master Vicar runs up for his box, claps it up under his arm, and when he goes to church. And for that it was Candlemas Day, a high day, he said and sung a very solemn mass. And that being done, seeing such a multitude of people, he got in with a great grace into the pulpit and began his text, which after he had rattled over a little, he told them what sundry relics were left to the church for the benefit of the people. "Oh, my masters and good friends," quoth he, "parishioners and neighbours."
You see that every city hereabout, nay, through the whole world, have some holy relic or other as a blessing belonging to their corporation. But our poor town of Bergamo hath had none. But now God hath considered of your estate, and hath sent you a richer and more holy than all the rest. Some town, quoth he, hath a piece of the cross, or of the nails, or a piece of the sponge, that reached Christ's vinegar. At Rome there is the spear that pierced his side. At Venice the jawbone of St. Mark, good for the falling evil. At Vienna the tooth of St. Upperlim, wholesome for the toothache. At Pisa the hoof of St. Loy's horse, that healeth such kind of cattle. For the swine St. Anthony's bell, for the pose, St. Dunstan's tongues, for the squincy, St. Martin's trough, for the eyesight, St. Winifred's girdle, for the palsy, St. Asaph's beads, and 1,000 more, which are now needless to rehearse.
But, good people, I have here for your comfort one of the feathers, yea, one of those holy and glorious feathers that the angel Gabriel wore when he said Ave Maria to the Mother of Christ. Old wives and aged men, yea, rich and poor, kneel down, and with joy behold so great a miracle. With that, they all fell upon their knees, and he pulled forth his box, and drew forth the case, which when he heard rattle, he marvelled. For when he put his hand in, and found nothing but coals, his heart was cold in his belly, and he sweat for woe. Yet having a knavish and a ready wit, he suddenly, and upon the present, shifted it thus.
"Good people," quoth he, "I have missed of my box, and have left the wing of the angel Gabriel behind me, but I have here a relic no less precious than that, which I thought not to show you before Easter day, and these be the coals that St. Lawrence the holy martyr was broiled with." And there with that he drew the charcoal out of his poke. These parishioners, quoth he, "even the very mark that is made with these is good against all evil spirits, against blasting and witchcraft. And therefore, seeing it is the will of God that I should show you these first, I will come down and mark you all with the holy relic of St. Lawrence." So he stepped down out of the pulpit and crossed them all, to his great profit and their content. For which cause, in that he mocked the people, he is appointed to stand in purgatory with a coal in his mouth.
The vicar's tale at Bergamo being ended, I went further, and presently I espied a little door, whereout issued a most fearful noise, tempered with such far-fetched sighs and grievous shrieks, that it was a sound much to be pitied. The smallness of the voice discovered that they were women. Whereupon I pressed more near the door, and looked in at a little chink, and there I might see a company of beautiful women of all ages pitifully tormented, as sitting in a place full of smoke and stinking savours, and bitten continually about the hearts with scorpions. In all there were not above 3 of them, and yet they uttered as grievous laments as though there had been 1,000. I demanded why these were punished above the rest. They said they were such as died maids and kept their virginity without spots, that hated men, and for they were so hard-hearted, they were adjudged to that sharp punishment. Straight as I cast mine eye up, I spied in a blind corner where a painter sat, having the picture of a rood hung before him, and every time he looked upon it, he had 3 bastonadoes over the shoulders with a bell rope, as of the rest. So I inquired the cause of this, and it was discoursed to me thus.
And we'll just pause there. Yes, gets a little problematic in that room. Let's go back to what feels like a definitely stolen the black pudding theft.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, no greater crime is known than the theft of a black pudding. It doesn't even seem to have a particularly sexual overtone or anything, which, considering the certainly the modern shape of the black pudding, is feels quite a disappointment, frankly. Just straightforwardly something you can easily hide up your sleeve.
The this story kind of rambles a bit. I mean, the puddings aren't really germane to why he's sitting in purgatory with a coal in his mouth. And
it's the setup of the reason why they get back at him with the coal kind of thing, isn't
and the
it?
feather.
So it's two stories for the price of one.
Well, I'm not complaining. It's a nice one.
Yeah, I quite like the randomness. I mean, it doesn't. You're right. It doesn't really go anywhere.
I love the list of relics that was the great list.
Yeah, that really does sort of give us a dating point from wherever the original story came from, because that's a very common feature of earlier texts. You know, we know in English drama that John Hayward is quite favourable of those in the late 1520s, early 1530s, and you know we've got traditions going back in continental traditions going back even further. So it's a well-worn trope, and it always goes down well. It's quite old-fashioned, I would have thought, by 1590, frankly. She with her holiday partner and sponging herself up went with her husband to church. Is that makeup?
A partlet is something. It's a linen thing that was basically a collar and like a shirt front, and you wore it to cover your bosom from your bodice upwards. And your holiday partlet would probably be made of finer linen than or have a nicer collar than your average partlet.
So you know, making herself look good when going to church, like a good, respectable citizen. You know.
Well, she's just been cooking all these puddings.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Sausages, rather, you know.
Hot puddings, good breakfast, good breakfast. It's a question of paying the malt man as well. It's, again, in a modern sense, just feels like, oh, not really. Horlicks. Sorry. Completely not. Where? No, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll just.
Bedtime drink. Yes.
I'm gonna bastinado with a belt rope.
Yeah.
What would I guess maybe a good final question once we've done with the text be? What would your punishment in purgatory be?
I can think of a few. Possibly living them now. Am I in purgatory already?
Clean family show. Come on.
So yeah, and the question of the bird, the Apis indica. I think Greg, you actually Googled that.
Yes. The only reference I can find to anything with that remote name is a bee. Random.
Apis is a lot of taxonomy was not done yet in the time this was written. Apis does tend to generally mean a bee, but it may be a misprint. Or there's a lot of crappy Latin in this text, but it may be a misprint for avis, meaning bird.
So the bird of India is it?
Like a phoenix or some sort of peacock or something. I mean, they knew what peacocks were, so it was probably something else.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the phoenix, because for some bizarre reason, when he was talking in that interesting kind of preachy scene about we've got this amazing relic, for some bizarre reason it kept reminding me of the tale of the phoenix, rising up from the ashes, and somebody actually getting hold of the phoenix feather. I can't remember the exact context, but there was something about it bringing luck, and it reminded me very much of that story. As I was listening to it.
It gets replaced with coal.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting weird resonance to that I quite like.
Well, they're the coals I mean, they're now the coals on which St. Lawrence was barbecued. Yes. But
Quick thinking, I have to say.
in general, when you see paintings of angels from this period and earlier, like paintings of the Annunciation, the angels have really fancy, colorful wings with gilding and stuff. So,
second call out for the angel Gabriel. This text. So always nice to have him, mentioned in passing at least. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next story? No. Okay. Who did we end up? We ended on Greg, didn't we? So Sascha, if you could start us on the. So we went into the room of the not desperately happy women who obviously upset some incels or something. Which we're just gonna walk away from that bit. I just say no.
Walk away.
So we get to the painter being not having a great time. The tale of the painter of Doncaster, and why in Purgatory he was beaten with a bell rope.
I know you are not ignorant. How in King Edward the 6 days all popery and superstition was banished, and the light of the gospel pulled from under the bushel where it was covered, and to the sight and comfort of all set upon a hill, so that all his relics were abolished, and his idols pulled down, and as the churches near as they could cleansed from the dregs of such an antichrist. Whereupon the painters that lived with such trash, as trimming of shrines and roods, altars and saints, and the carvers that made such images, were fain with Alexander the coppersmith to cry out against Paul and his doctrine, having so little work that they almost forgot their occupation.
But when for the sins of this land and wickedness of the people, the Lord took away their good king and deprived them of the sweet manner of the gospel, and sent them again Antichrist with all his traditions, Queen Mary, lawful successor in this kingdom. Oh, yeah, sorry, I should read that later. And sent them again Antichrist with all his traditions, Queen Mary, lawful successor in the kingdom, made proclamation that all these roods which were pulled down should be set up again in every church. Amongst the rest, the Queen of Doncaster in the Church of Doncaster in Yorkshire, desiring to be one of the foremost to signify their obedience and devotion, in all haste sent for the painter to make them a rood, and agreed upon the price.
Whereupon he went about his work. But for that his hand had been out of use by the space of 6 years, he had forgot the lineaments of the visage, and the other wonted proportion that he made it very hard-favoured. Yet, as every man's work seems well to himself, he went forward withal, and set it up on a Saturday at night on the rood loft. On Sunday at Mass there was old ringing of bells, and old and young came to church to see the new rood, which was so ill-favoured that all the parish misliked it. The children they cried, and were afraid of it. Upon this they fell in great displeasure with the painter, and when Monday came, and he was with the church of he was with the chief of the parish for his money, they denied flatly to pay him any because his work was so ill-wrought.
He upon that called them before the mayor of the town, who was a man that favoured King Edward's religion as far as he durst, and to him the painter made his complaint, that the parishioners, now that he had made their rood, would not pay him his money. The mayor demanded of them why they denied him payment. They answered, for that he had like a bungler made Christ so hard-favoured that it was not only unfit to stand in any church, but their children were afraid to look on it, so that every way it should greatly hinder devotion.
But yet, quoth the mayor, the poor man hath done his good will. You must consider his hand hath long been out of use, and therefore there is no reason though his cunning hath failed him. But you should pay him his money. Well, sir, quoth he, yet your request, we will give him what our bargain was, but we must buy a new rood, and cannot tell what to do with the old. Marry, neighbours, quoth the mayor, if he will not serve you for a god, follow my advice. Clap a pair of horns on his head, and I warrant you he will provide an excellent good devil. And that, sir, quoth the painter, will I do over and besides, their bargain. Thus were the poor parishioners of Doncaster mocked, and yet paid their money. But their vicar so dealt with bell, book, and candle against the poor painter for making the ill-favoured rude, that he sits in purgatory, beaten with a bell rope.
I'm just going to pause there before we go on to the linking material. Yeah, it's interesting addressing this question of what happens to crafts and traditions, when suddenly you're all put out of work. I find that really interesting. It also feels like it's quite a different voice to some of the other stuff. I mean, it really felt very, very different. I was trying to figure out where to put the punctuation and landed very wrong. I don't think even then they would call the Queen Mary literally the Antichrist. I think we'll say that was not where to put the stress, but I thought I'd try it anyway. So what precisely? It's starting to remind me of those awkward amateur restorations that we've had in churches recently. Of just it's scaring the children.
Funnily enough, Rob, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Well, you could. I have to read back through these because I think each story. These stories look into different bits of Catholic doctrine, which are being portrayed as false and evil. And this one is about having images in churches. There are so many nice old churches in England that used to have these beautiful painted walls and these altar paintings. And the Restoration came, and sculptures were smashed, and the painted walls were whitewashed. They took the "thou shalt not have any graven images" very seriously and extended it not only to engraved images but to painted images. But I agree with you that the tone of this story is a little different. It feels like one of those urban myths that always happened to a friend of a friend. And it does sound like the kind of story that might be in a theater clown's collection of anecdotes.
Yeah, Sasha.
And to throw in another little angle as well, up until this point, we've had quite a lot of stories that have been either really OTT funny or innuendo, but it's almost like the writer here is now trying to redress the balance with something a lot more serious, just to kind of overcompensate in a way for those who might be offended. So, it could be just simply a way of saying, yeah, okay, that's that quota done. Now I've got to please this quota. Still a good story, though.
Yeah, it's set in Doncaster. We've been doing Italian cities and stuff that feels very far away, and it's in Doncaster. That's it's suddenly a fundamentally different kind of narrative of the way it works.
Exotic
it's a
Doncaster.
Local dispute. Sorry, say again, Liza?
Exotic Doncaster.
Yeah. But you get that in jest books where you've got stories about, funny things happening out in the sticks kind of thing. And there's an element, a bit of that here, though not too far. It hasn't gone into that much detail about the joke, because the joke is quite swiftly dealt with, and that's it. And that's all you get. Any other thoughts?
I just find it interesting that the painting followed him to hell. Like, before the story, he's described as sitting in front of a painting of a rood, and when he looks at a rood being, of course, a crucifixion with Jesus on it, and whenever he looks at it, a bell rope hits him. It's like
it's. I just have this image of some poor unfortunate having to look at the monkey Jesus and being beaten. It's just that thing. That's that was the earliest one of these unfortunate restorations that we've had recently, a few years back. Bless. In the name of art. Okay, we have some linking material now with a lengthy little bit that Liza's going to get in a moment. Lucky you. So at the end of the tale of the painter being ended, passing a little further, I might see where sat a crew of men that wore bay garlands on their heads, and they were poets, among which was old Aeneas, Virgil, Juvenal, Propertius, don't know that one, and wanton Ovid, Martial, Horace, and many more, which had written lascivious verse or other heroical poems. But above them all I marked old Ronsard, and he sat there with a scroll in his hand, wherein was written the description of Cassandra, his mistress. And because his style is not common, nor have I heard our English poets write in that vein, mark it, and I will rehearse it, for I have learned it by heart.
Ronsard's description of his mistress, which he wears in his hand in Purgatory. Down I sat down where Flora had bestowed her graces. Green it was green, far surpassing other places. For art and nature did combine with sights to witch the gazer's eyne. There I sat there viewing of this pride of places. Straight I saw straight the sweetest fair of all fair faces, such a face as did contain heaven's shine in every vein. I did look did I, and there I saw Apollo's wires. Bright they were bright, with them Aurora's head he tires. But this I wondered, how that now they shadowed in Cassandra's brow. Still I gazed still, spying Luna's milk-white glass, commixed fine commixed with the morning's ruddy blaze. This white and red their seating seeks upon Cassandra's smiling cheeks. Two stars then 2 stars, passing sun or moon in shine, appeared there appeared, and were, forsooth, my mistress Eyne, from whence proud Cupid threw his fire to set aflame all men's desire. Breasts she had breasts, white like the silver dove. There did lie Cupid, overgrown with love, and in the vale that parts the plain, pitched his tent there to remain. This was she was this, the fairest fair that e'er I see. I did muse did I, how such a creature found could be. A voice replied from the air, she alone, and none so fair.
This was Ronsard's description of his mistress, and he is forced to hold it in his hand, that every time he casts his eyes on it, he may with sighs feel a secret torment, and that he wants love too, and much being alive. A little above sat the ghost of a young gentlewoman that had been false to her husband. She should have been grievously tormented, but that she bestowed an annuity for 3 years' pension upon a Monomass priest, who so laboured it with dirges, trentals, and masses ad requiem, that she had no other punishment but this, that her beautiful hair, wherein she so much delighted, and whose trammels was a train to entrap young gentlemen, that now was clipped off bare to the skull, and so she sat ashamed and mourning. The cause, as I learned, was this.
Just pause before we get to that. It started sounding like a weird language course. I did look I did. Repeat.
She had breasts.
Breasts she had. And yet some of the lines are quite good. It's this weird juxtaposition of sort of deliberately, I'm assuming deliberately ridiculous repetitions, as well as stuff that sort of functions. I don't quite know what it's doing or what it's spoofing or what's going on there. Liza, you lived through it. Any thoughts?
Well, I remember reading Ronsard at school for a French class. He's a medieval French poet who writes about love a lot. And this verse, one thing I thought when I read it over was that it's another thing that makes me, I don't know. When you know someone well, you sometimes see them where they're not. But it does make me suspect perhaps John Florio's hand in this, or someone like him, because one of his great works was a translate. He was Italian English, but he also spoke French, and one of his great works was a translation of Montaigne. And there's a lot of verse in that, and he translates the verse into poetry. He doesn't translate it as prose. And the verse reminds me of his style more than it does of Armin's. But then even Armin's hand in this is not certain. So we don't really know. The author, whoever the author is, it seems a very lyrical interlude. Yes, the verse is faintly ridiculous with its inversion of word order, but the author doesn't give us a tip-off that he finds it ridiculous. He simply says that the master, the poet is forced to read it while in hell, and every time he sees it, he feels pain because he loved too much being alive, which is kind of uncharacteristically lyrical for this book.
Yes, there does seem to be a certain disparity now between the bits, whereas it felt very much like there was a single voice yesterday, or at least, you know, it may have flowed a bit between different voices, but now we've gone from quite radically different takes between these tales, and slightly different voices are coming into play. And yeah, so it's a very different thing. You're right. It does. Some of it works very nicely, and you know, it is semi-erotic, and some of it sort of works quite well as Cupid overgrown with love, and in the veil that the parts the pain pitched his tent there to remain.
No, I think that's a misprint. I think it's the veil that parts the plain.
Yes, but yeah, the general sentiment is still I think is clear enough. And then we go to this sort of odd, you know, this other torment. And it's like, so you know, she's only been getting she's only getting her beloved hair cut off because she's got a priest who's doing lots of dirges, masses, etc.
Yes, she should have probably gone to hell for adultery.
Yeah,
it's implied.
Well, we don't know the story yet. We're about to hear it.
Well, they said she'd been false to her husband in the preceding paragraph. But it's very striking that we go from this image of female beauty, of idealized pastoral beauty, which will have its effect on the reader, especially. And then we go to a woman whose beauty was so much of a temptation that her punishment is to have it cut off.
So, any other thoughts before we move forward? Okay, again, not too long a text. I think Sasha's up first.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Why the gentle... Sorry, go on.
No, Greg, you're gone.
Sorry. Why the gentlewoman of Lyons sat with her hair clipped off in Purgatory. In the city of Lyons there dwelt a gentleman of good account amongst his neighbours, called Monsieur Perrault. This gentleman, having lands and revenues sufficient to maintain his estate, thought fully to heap to himself content, and therefore sought out a young virgin of equal parentage to himself, with whom he had a sufficient dowry, and her he loved, and she liked him, and so they married, living in good estimation among their tenants.
As they were thus linked together in wedlock, so it seemed in outward appearance that they were so strictly tied in affection as no means might alienate. But women, whom nature hath framed to be inconstant, cannot be altered by nurture. I feel on very thin ice saying these words. The palm will grow straight, though it be never so depressed, and a wanton will be a wanton, were she married to Cupid, and so it proved by Maria. For so was the gentle woman's name, who, because she was fair, had many suitors, that attempted to be rivals with her husband in her love. Amongst the rest, as she resolved to choose one, there was a young amorous youth of Lyons called Pierre, who sought diverse means to creep into her favour, passed by her house, and cast up looks that pleaded for pity, and had banded him again glances that foreshowed goodwill.
Thus, with interchange of favours, they lived, Pierre seeking opportunity how to reveal his mind to Maria. At last, as he walked one day forth the town, he saw where she was walking only with one of her maids. Taking therefore opportunity by the forehead, he stepped to her, and began to court her with sundry protestations of his love, which had been long and so surely set as no despair could race out, promising not only to be a faithful servant in constancy, but to be so careful of her honour as of his own life. And for your gravité, think, mistress, quoth he, that faults in affections are slight follies, that Venus hath shrines to shade her truants, and Cupid's wings are shelters for such as venture far to content their thoughts. Unseen is half pardoned, and love requires not chastity, but that her soldiers be cherry.
Maria, hearing the wag thus play the orator, having love in her eyes and desire in heart, after a few faint denials, thrusting him away with her little finger, and pulling him to her with the whole hand, she granted him that favour to be called her servant. Graced thus he grew in such credit, that there was no man with Maria but Pierre. Having thus a love beside a husband, although he was a fair man and well-featured, yet she found fault with him, because he was a meacock and a milksop, not daring to draw his sword to revenge her wrongs, wherefore she resolved to entertain some soldier, and so she did. For one Signor Lamberto, a brave gentleman, but something hard-faced, sought but her favour, and found it, and him she entertained for her champion.
Thus had she a white-livered Adon to fill her eye with beauty, and a stout Hercules to revenge all her wrongs with his sword, and a poor husband to shadow both with his horns. Living with him, he carried his wife. Living thus contentedly in her own conceit, her husband went into the country to a farm of his, and thither with him carried his own wife, where he passed away many a merry days in such pleasure as county sports can afford. At last serious affairs forcing him to it, he rid his way for 3 or 4 days to certain of his friends there adjoining.
Maria, seeing her husband gone, thought not to let time slip, nor to lose opportunity, and therefore the next day after sent for Pierre, who hasted as fast as it might be till he came to his mistress, where he had such friendly entertainment as fitted both their humours. She caused her maid to make great cheer, and as soon as it was ready to dinner they went, where they were scarce set but one knocked at the door. The maid looked out, and it was Signor Lamberto. She ran and told her mistress, who, fearful that he should see Pierre or know of him, hid him under the bed, and commanded her maid to bid Signor Lamberto to come up. She, like a cunning courtesan, giving him such a feeble entertainment, as though he were the man who above all other she made account of.
Faith, sweet, quoth he, I heard thy husband was from home, and so I took my nag and came galloping hither. Set him into the stable, quoth the mistress. No, quoth the Signor Lamberto. Let him be there still, and bite of the bridle, for my business is such as I will only dine with you, and then bid you farewell. And with that he sat him down to dinner. Poor Pierre, lying close under the bed, thinking every minute an hour till he were gone, as they sat in their cups and were wantedly quaffing to one another, came in the maid running, and said, her master came riding. At this Signor Lamberto started up and was amazed. But the gentlewoman was in a fear that had 2 lovers at once in her house, and yet could have hidden them both had it not been for the horse that stood tied in the courtyard. Well, a shift must be had, and where sooner than out of a woman's head.
Shall I do, quoth Signor Lamberto, Marry, I pray you, good sweetheart, quoth she, to save your own credit and mine, draw your sword and go down the stairs. And as you go, swear and say that you shall find a time and place more convenient when you will be revenged to the uttermost. So he did. And by that time was the gentleman of the house come in, who marvelled to see a horse tied in the court, and therefore slighting off came up the stairs. And alighting off came up the stairs, and as he came, met Signor Lamberto with his sword drawn, and his face full of frowns, swearing, when fitter time and place should serve, he would revenge, and that with extremity.
What is the matter? Quoth the master of ye house. He answered nothing, but put up his sword, took horse, and away towards Lyons. As soon as the gentleman came up, he found his wife amazed, sitting in the hall in the midst of the floor, as half beside herself. What is the matter, wife? Quoth he. Oh, husband, quoth she, as I sat here at my work, came running into the courtyard a proper young man, having thrown away his cloak and his hat, and desired me, as I tended the state of a man, to save his life, for Signor Lamberto would kill him.
I, pitying his case, stepped in and hid him in my bedchamber, and with that came Signor Lamberto galloping, dismounted in the court, and drawing his sword, came running up and would have broken open my chamber door, but that on my knees I entreated him to the contrary. At my request he went his way, frowning, as you see, and so he rode to Lyons. The poor man, alas, husband, lies hidden under the bed in great fear. And this tale was told so loud that Pierre heard every word, and therefore had his lesson what he should answer, smiling at the prompt wit of his mistress, that had so sudden a shift.
Bid him come out, wife, quoth he. Then she opened the door, and Pierre he came, as one greatly affrighted, from under the bed. The gentleman, seeing him a proper young man and weaponless, had pity on him, and said he was glad that his house was a sanctuary for him, and greatly commended his wife that she had saved him from the fury of Signor Lamberto, whom all Lyons accounted a most desperate man. Upon this, taking Pierre by the hand, they sat down to dinner, and when they had taken their repast, the gentleman very courteously conducted Pierre home to Lyons. Now, for because she was thus inconstant, she, to quality her pride and insolency, sat in purgatory with the punishment afore rehearsed.
This tale being ended, I looked a little further, and I might see where a young man and a young woman sat together naked from the middle upward, and a very old man whipping of them with nettles. They, as persons that little regarded his punishment, would oftentimes kiss, and then the old man, as one inwardly vexed, would bestir all his strength to torment them. The reason of this strange show was thus discoursed on to me.
You can hire professionals to do that for you these days.
It's the whisk and the lead celery, isn't
it? Yeah, there's some lovely lines in this. I particularly like taking therefore opportunity by the forehead. I think there's that I don't know if that's that has a provenance of an additional meaning that I don't know. I like the idea of thrusting him away with the little finger and pulling him to her with the whole hand. That's a nice
That was
phrase.
fab. I love that.
Yeah. Go away. Go away. Come here.
I mean, I know this is I know this is prose, but I could so imagine that on stage.
The trouble is, I'm now going straight back to the carry-on feel that we had last night with one of the tales.
Funny that, I was literally thinking this sounds like a carry-on or a Chaucer.
Yeah,
it's a bedroom farce. What do you do with your lovers when your husband comes home? Well, you throw him underneath the bed.
At least get your story straight, love.
Yes, there are lots of variations on a theme of this kind of story that we've got all over the shop, going back many hundreds of years earlier than this. So we've got plenty of this. yeah, so good. I like the fact she's compartmentalized what the various men in her life do. She's got the attractive lover, the one who will fight for her, and presumably other things as well, and the husband who's sort of just the money, and he's nice. I mean, he's all right. He's not
Well, the husband
hideous.
seems very reasonable, really.
Yeah, he's just a nice bloke. He's a chartered accountant or something. He's not exciting.
Nice but
Quantity
thin.
surveyor. Quantity surveyor.
Yes, and what strikes me is that it was very provident of her to arrange 2 lovers, because it would have been much harder to disguise the presence of just one.
Yeah. No, but that's also the coordination there. She should have written to the other one to come the day after. She only wrote to one of them. I think that was very inexcusable. Actually, that's poor planning. Poor planning. You've got to make sure everyone's in the WhatsApp group.
What's the WhatsApp group called?
I had to think. The wanton wenches?
Its title is just the aubergine emoji and nothing else.
Oh, yeah. Or the carrot emoji.
Carry on bed. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Carry on hair.
Yeah. Yes. Obviously, it's got occasional bits of misogyny just randomly thrown in every so often. Women whom nature have framed to be inconstant, etc., etc., etc. And the overall framing of it is a bit problematic.
And then that amusing metaphor of the palm, which seems to me somewhat phallic, that you can bend a palm tree down, but it will always go straight up again.
Any other thoughts about this particular bedroom farce? We are in the home straight, people. We've only got one more story to go. It's quite a long one, so I may pause you halfway through. Who would we reach to? Was it Greg last?
Yes.
So, Sascha, you get to start the story again.
Hey.
Sorry, just before we do. So, what was this? Oh, yes, this was the whipping with nettles.
This is the whipping with the nettles.
Yeah, but they're still kissing in between. And he's just going, oh, more nettles for you. Strange. Anyway, let's find out why.
Yes. The tale of the 2 lovers of Pisa, and why they were whipped in Purgatory with nettles. In Pisa, a famous city of Italy, there lived a gentleman of good lineage and lands, feared as well for his wealth as honoured for his virtue, but indeed well thought on for both, yet the better for his riches. This gentleman had only one daughter called Margaret, who for her beauty was liked of all and desired of many, but neither might their suits nor her own eye prevail about her father's resolution, who was determined not to marry her, but to such a man as should be able in abundance to maintain the excellency of her beauty. Divers young gentlemen proffered large offments, but in vain. A maid she must be still, till at last an old doctor in the town that professed physic became a suitor to her, who was a very welcome man to her father, in that he was one of the wealthiest men in all Pisa.
A tall stripling he was, and a proper youth, his age about 80, his head as white as milk, wherein, for offence sake, there was never left a tooth. But it is no matter. What he wanted in person, he had in the purse, which the poor gentlewoman little regarded, wishing rather to tie herself to one that might fit her content, though they lived meanly than to him with all the wealth in Italy. But she was young, and forced to follow her father's direction, who upon large covenants was content his daughter should marry with the doctor, and whether she liked him or no, the match was made up, and in short time she was married. The poor wench was bound to the stake, and had not only an impotent old man, but one that was so jealous as none might enter into his house without suspicion, nor she do anything without blame. The least glance, the smallest countenance, any smile was a manifest instance to him that she thought of others better than himself. Thus he himself lived in a hell, and tormented his wife in as ill perplexity.
At last it chanced that a young gentleman of the city coming by her house, and seeing her look out at her window, noting her rare and excellent proportion, fell in love with her, and that so extremely as his passions had no means till her favour might mitigate his heartsick discontent. The young man that was ignorant in amorous matters, and had never been used to court any gentlewoman, thought to reveal his passions to some one friend, that might give him counsel for winning of her love, and thinking experience was the surest master, on a day seeing the old doctor walking in the church that was Margaret's husband, little knowing who he was, he thought the fittest man to whom he might discover his passions, for that he was old and knew much, and was a physician that with his drug might help him forward in his purposes. So that, seeing the old man walk solitary, he joined unto him, and after a courteous salute, told him that he was to impart a matter of great import unto him, wherein, if he would not only be secret, but endeavour to pleasure him, his pains should be in every way to the full considered.
You must imagine, gentlemen, quoth Mutio, for so was the doctor's name, that men of our profession are no blabs, but hold their secrets in their hearts' bottom, and therefore reveal what you please. It shall not only be concealed, but cured if either my art or my counsel may do it. Upon this, Lionel, so was the young gentleman called, told and discoursed unto him from point to point how he was fallen in love with a gentlewoman that was married to one of his profession, discovered her dwelling and the house, and for that he was unacquainted with the woman and a man little experienced in love matters, he required his favour to further him with his advice.
Mutio at this motion was stung to the heart, knowing it was his wife he was fallen in love withal. Yet to conceal the matter, and to experience his wife's chastity, and that if she played false he might be revenged on them both, he dissembled the matter, and answered that he knew the woman very well, and commended her highly, but said she had a churl to her husband, and therefore he thought she would be the more tractable. Try her, man, quoth he. Faint heart never won fair lady. And if she will not be brought to the bent of your bow, I will provide such a potion as shall dispatch all to your own content. And to give you further instructions for opportunity, know that her husband is forth every afternoon from 3 till 6. Thus far I have advised you, because I pity your passions as myself once been a lover. But now I charge thee reveal it to none whomsoever, lest it do me disparage my credit to meddle in amorous matters. The young gentleman not only promised all careful secrecy, but gave him hearty thanks for his good counsel, promising to meet him there the next day, and tell him what news.
Then he left the old man, who was almost mad for fear his wife anyway should play false. He saw by experience brave men came to besiege the castle, and seeing it was a woman's custody and had so weak a governor as himself, he doubted he would in time be delivered up, which fear made him almost frantic. Yet he drived of the time in great torment till he might hear from his rival. Lionel, he hastes him home and suits him in his bravery, and goes down towards the house of Mutio, where he seeks her at the window, whom he courted with a passionate look, with such an humble salute, as she might perceive how the gentleman was affectionate.
Margareta, looking earnestly upon him, and noting the perfection of his proportion, accompanied him in her eye the flower of all Pisa, thinked herself fortunate if she might have him for her friend, to supply those defaults she found in Mutio. Sundry times that afternoon he passed by her window, and he cast not up more loving looks than he received gracious favours, which did so encourage him that the next day between 3 and 6 he went to her house, and knocking at the door, desired to speak with the mistress of the house, who, hearing by her maid's description what he was, commanded him to come in, where she entertained him with all courtesy.
The youth that had never had before, the youth that never before had given the attempt to court a lady, began his exordium with a blush, and yet went forward so well that he discoursed unto her how he loved her, and that if it might please us so to accept of his service, as if a friend ever vowed in all duty to be at her command, the care of her honour should be dearer to him than his life, and would be ready to prize her discontent with his blood at all times.
The gentlewoman was a little coy, but before they passed, they concluded that the next day at 4 o'clock he should come thither and eat a pound of cherries, which was resolved on with a sucada dis labres, and so with a loath to depart, they took their leaves. Leonello, as joyful a man as might be, hied him to the church to meet his old doctor, where he found him in his old walk. "What news, sir?" quoth Mutio. "How have you sped?" "Even as I can wish," quoth Leonello, "for I have been with my mistress, and have found her so tractable, that I hope to make the old peasant her husband look broad-headed by a pair of brow antlers." How deep this struck into Mutio's heart, let them imagine that can conjecture what jealousy is, insomuch that the old doctor asked when should be the time. "Marry," quoth Leonello, "tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then, Master Doctor," quoth he, "will I dub the old squire knight of the 4th order."
Thus they passed on in chat till it grew late, and then Lionello went home to his lodging and Mutio to his house, covering all his sorrows with a merry countenance, with full resolution to revenge them both the next day with extremity. He passed the night as patiently as he could, and the next day after dinner away he went, watching when it should be 4 of the clock at the hour. Just came Leonello, and was entertained with all courtesy. But scarce had they kissed, ere the maid cried out to her mistress that her master was at the door, for he hasted, knowing that a horn was but a little while on grafting. Margaret, at this alarum, was amazed, and yet for a shift put Lionel into a great defant full of feathers, and sat her down close to her work. By that came Mutio in blowing, and though he came to look at somewhat in haste, called for the keys of his chambers, and looked in every place, searching so narrowly in every corner of the house that he left not the very privy unsearched. Seeing he could not find him, he said nothing, but feigning himself not well at ease, stayed at home, so that poor Lionello was fain to stay in the griffat till the old churl was in bed with his wife. And then the maid let him out at a back door, who went home with a flea in his ear to his lodging. I'm just going to pause there. Before the story goes any further. Is it sounding familiar to anyone? All these elements seem awfully familiar. I don't know if anyone knows of a specific thing that this is familiar from, but it all feels very. Liza, you're currently muted, so
You know very well that we can't say it. We will be pursued by a duck
Yeah.
into hell.
Yeah.
I wasn't actually thinking that, but never mind. That wasn't where I was going. I was just talking about old people being generally obsessed with keeping control of their young wives. It's a common trope. I'm just saddened and disappointed in you all. It's that game is being played as this man is going to torment himself further and further. Lots of nice brow antlers. I like a brow antler. Any thoughts or things you want to jump in on?
Well, if the last one was bedroom fast, this is bedroom complete mass fast.
Yes, well, it's sort of magnanimous cuckold territory at the moment, isn't it? We're not quite that far yet, but that's a much more complicated plot.
He's not that magnanimous.
He's not that magnanimous. Yeah, but it's the same sort of madness that leads to that plot point. Though he's not actually going to invite the entire locality to sleep with his wife. But very different story. Not going to the same starting point, different ending. Yeah. Any. You know, we're definitely going in. It's they're really busy in Italy, aren't they? All the women are beautiful, gorgeous. There's lots of beautiful men as well. You know, it's all human life is here. They're mostly gorgeous. So yeah. Any more? Shall we continue? Okay, let's go into the home straight, he said. It's Liza next.
Well, the next day he went again to meet his doctor, whom he found in his wonted walk. "What news?" quoth Muzio. "Have you sped?" "A pox of the old slave," quoth Leonello. "I was no sooner in, and had given my mistress one kiss, but the jealous ass was at the door. The maid spied him, and cried her master, so that the poor gentlewoman for very shift was fain to put me in a driefat of feathers that stood in an old chamber, and there I was fain to tarry while he was in bed and asleep, and then the maid let me out, and I departed."
To be short, Thursday came, and about 6 o'clock, forth goes Mutio.
We had to jump.
I was thinking that.
It is no matter.
Oh dear. To be short, Thursday
No,
came.
but it is no matter, isn't it?
Oh, sorry.
It doesn't matter, yeah.
It's all right. It doesn't matter. But it is. I lost it now.
It's still Leonello speaking here.
But it is no matter, 'twas but a chance.
Shall I do that bit and have Greg read Thursday?
Yeah, it's all right. I'm getting lost now. Yes, go back to. Yes, sorry.
So Leonello's been put in the driefat of feathers that stood in an old chamber. He stays there. He says, "I was fain to tarry while he was in bed and asleep, and then the maid let me out, and I departed. But it is no matter, 'twas but a chance, and I hope to cry quittance with him ere it be long." "As how?" quoth Muzio. "Marry thus," quoth Leonello. "She sent me word by her maid this day, that upon Thursday the old churl suppeth with a patient of his a mile out of Pisa, and then I fear not but to quite him for all." "It is well," quoth Muzio. "Fortune be your friend." "I thank you," quoth Leonello, and so after a little more prattle they departed.
To be short, Thursday came, and about 6 o'clock, forth goes Mutio no further than a friend's house of his, from whence he might descry who went into his house. Straight he saw Leonello enter, and after he goes he, insomuch that he was scarcely sitten down, before the maid cried out again, "My master comes!" The good wife, that before had provided for afterclaps, had found out a privy place between two ceilings of a plauncher, and there she thrust Leonello, and her husband came sweating. "What news?" quoth "What news," quoth she, "drives you home again so soon, husband?"
"Marry, sweet life," quoth he, "a fearful dream that I had this night, which came to my remembrance, and that was this. Methought there was a villain, who came secretly into my house with a naked poniard in his hand, and hid himself. But I could not find the place, with that mine nosebleed, and I came back, and by the grace of God I will seek every corner in the house for the quiet of my mind. Marry, I pray you do, husband," quoth she. With that, he locked in all the doors, and began to search every chamber, every hole, every chest, every tub, the very well. He stabbed every feather bed through, and made havoc like a madman, which made him think all was in vain, and he began to blame his eyes that thought they saw that which they did not. Upon this he rest half lunatic, and all night he was very wakeful, that towards the morning he fell into a deep sleep, and then was Leonello conveyed away.
In the morning when Mutio wakened, he thought how by no means he should be able to take Leonello tardy. Yet he laid in his head a most dangerous plot, and that was this. Wife, quoth he, I must the next Monday ride to Vicenza to visit an old patient of mine. Till my return, which will be some 10 days, I will have that stay at our little grange house in the country. Marry? Very well, content, husband, quoth she. With that he kissed her, and was very pleasant, as though he had suspected nothing, and away he flings to the church, where he meets Leonello. What, sir, quoth he, what news? Is your mistress yours in possession? No, a plague of the old slave, quoth he.
I think he's either a witch or else works by magic, for I can no sooner enter the doors but he's at my back, and so he was again yesternight. For I was not warm in my seat before the maid cried, My master comes! And then was the poor soul fain to convey me between two ceilings of a chamber in a fit place for the purpose, where I laughed heartily myself to see how he sought every corner, ransacked every tub, and stabbed every feather bed, but in vain. I was safe enough till the morning, and when he was fast asleep I slipped out. Fortune frowns on you, quoth Muzio.
I hope, quoth Leonardo, this is the last time. Now she began to smile, for on Monday next he rides to Vicenza, and his wife lies at a grange house a little off the town, and there in his absence I will revenge all forepast misfortunes. God send it to be so, quoth Muzio, and so took his leave. These two lovers longed for Monday, and at last it came. Early in the morning Muzio horsed himself, and his wife, his maid, and a man, and no more. And away he rides to his grange house, where after he had broke his fast, he took his leave, and away towards Vicenza. He rode not far, ere by a false way he returned into a thicket, and there with a company of country peasants lay in an ambuscade to take the young gentleman.
In the afternoon comes Leonello galloping, and as soon as he came within sight of the house, he sent back his horse by his boy, and went easily afoot, and there at the very entry was entertained by Margaret, who led him up the stairs, and conveyed him into her bedchamber, saying he was welcome in so mean a cottage. But, quoth she, no, I hope fortune shall not envy the purity of our loves.
Alas, alas, mistress, cried the maid, here is my master, and 100 men with him, with bills and staves. We are betrayed, quoth Lionello, and I am but a dead man. Fear not, quoth she, but follow me. And straight she carried him down into a low parlour, where stood an old rotten chest full of writings. She put him into that, and covered him with old papers and evidences, and went to the gate to meet her husband. Liza, you're muted.
Yes, I am muted. Why, Signor Muzio, what means this hurly-burly? Quoth she. Vile and shameless strumpet as thou art, thou shalt know by and by, quoth he.
Where is thy love? Or we have watched him and seen he enter in. Now, quoth he, shall neither the tub of feathers nor thy ceiling serve, for perish she shall with fire, or else fall into my hands. Do thy worst, jealous fool, quoth she. I ask thee no favour. With that in a rage you beset the house round, and then set fire on it.
Oh, what in a perplexity was poor Leonello that was shut in the chest, and the fire about his ears! And how was Margaret passionate that knew her lover in such danger? Yet she made light of the matter, and as one in a rage called her maid to her, and said, Come on, wench, seeing thy master mad with jealousy has set the house and all my living on fire, I will be revenged upon him. Help me to lift this old chest where all his writings and deeds are. Let that burn first, and as soon as I see that on fire, I will walk towards my friends, for the old fool will be beggared, and I will refuse him. Muzio knew that all his obligations and statutes laid there pulled her back, and bade 2 of his men carry the chest into the field, and see it was safe, himself standing by, and seeing his house burned down stick and stone.
Then, quieted in his mind, he went home with his wife and began to flatter her, thinking assuredly that he had burned her paramour, causing his chest to be carried in a cart to his house at Pisa. Margaret, impatient, went to her mother's, and complained to her and to her brethren of the jealousy of her husband, who maintained it to be true and desired but a day's respite to prove it. Well, he was bidden to supper the next night at her mother's, she thinking to make her daughter and him friends again. In the meantime, he to his wonted walk in the church, and there, prey to expectations, he found Leonello walking. Wondering at this, he straight inquires, "What news?"
"What news, Master Doctor?" quoth he, and he fell in a great laughing. "In faith, yesterday I scaped a scouring. For, sirrah, I went to the Grange house where I was appointed to come, and I was no sooner gotten up the chamber, but that magical villain, her husband, beset the house with bills and staves, and that he might be sure no ceiling or corner should shroud me, he set the house on fire, so burnt it down to the ground." "Why," quoth Muzio, "and how did you escape?"
Alas, quoth I, were fair a woman's wit. She conveyed me into an old chest full of writings, which your husband durst not burn, and so was I saved and brought to Pisa, and yesternight by her maid let home to my lodging. This, quoth he, is the pleasantest jest that ever I heard, and upon this I have a suit to you. I am this night bidden forth to supper. You shall be my guest, only I will crave so much favour as after supper for a pleasant sport, to make relation what success you have had in your loves. For that I will not stick, quoth he, and so he carried Leonardo to his mother-in-law's house with him, and discovered to his wife's brethren who he was, and how at supper he would disclose the whole matter. For, quoth he knows not that I am Margaret's husband. At this all the brethren bade him welcome, and so did the mother too, and Margaret, she was kept out of sight.
Supper time being come, they fell to their victuals, and Leonora was coerced unto Mutio, who was very pleasant to draw him to a merry humour, that he might to the full discourse the effect and fortunes of his love. Supper being ended, Mutio requested him to tell to the gentleman what had happened between him and his mistress. Leonello, with a smiling countenance, began to describe his mistress, the house, and street where she dwelt, how he fell in love with her, and how he used the counsel of this doctor, who in all his affairs was his secretary. Margaret heard all of this with great fear, and when he came at the last point, she caused a cup of wine to be given him by one of her sisters, wherein was a ring that he had given Margaret, as he had told how he escaped burning, and was ready to confirm all for a truth. The gentlewoman drank to him, who, taking the cup, and seeing the ring having a quick wit and a reaching head, spied the fetch, and perceived that all this while this was his lover's husband, to whom he had revealed these escapes. At this, drinking the wine, and swallowing the ring into his mouth, he went forward.
"Gentlemen," quoth he, "how like you of my loves and my fortunes?"
"Well," quoth the gentleman, "I pray you, is it true?" "As true," quoth he, "as if I would be so simple as to reveal what I did to Margaret's husband. For know you, gentlemen, that I knew this Muzio to be her husband, whom I notified to be my lover, and for that he was generally known throughout Pisa to be a jealous fool. Therefore with these tales I brought him into this paradise, which indeed are the follies of mine own brain, for trust me, by the faith of a gentleman, I never spake to the woman, was never in her company, and neither do I know her if I see her."
This they all fell in laughing at Mutio, who was ashamed that Leonardo had so scoffed him. But all was well, and they were made friends. But the jest went so to his heart that he shortly after died, and Leonardo enjoyed the lady, and for that they too were the death of the old man. Now are they plagued in purgatory, and he whips them with nettles.
As soon as I had passed over these 2 of Pisa, I looked about and saw many more, as mad and pleasant as the rest. But my time was come that I must to the judge to be censured. What punishment I should have for myself for all the mad wanton tricks that I did when I was alive. Faith. And because they knew I was a boon companion, they appointed that I should sit and play jigs all day on my tabor to the ghosts without ceasing, which hath brought me into such use that I now play far better than when I was alive. For proof, thou shalt hear a hornpipe. With that putting his pipe to his mouth, the first stroke he struck, I started, and with that I waked, and saw such concourse of people through the fields that I knew play was done. Whereupon, rising up, and smiling at my dream, and after supper, took my pen, and as near as I could set it down, but not half so pleasantly as he spoke it, but howsoever, take it in good part, and so farewell.
The end. Ah. At least Tarlton managed to get some tabor practice in, and in it's nice to do that, and I quite like that the dream. I like the way it said, "I looked about and saw many more as mad and pleasant tricks as the rest." And I'm sort of thinking, he's holding out for a sequel, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got more stories if this sells well. Yeah. So the ring saved him. Yeah. As long as he didn't have to swallow it or anything. Yeah, so it's quite a. I like the knew that play was done. I'm interested about the absence of the. I knew play was done. I like that. That interests me. Liza, you're muted.
Perhaps it's I knew that play was done. That play that he'd talked about in the intro?
Yeah, well, yes, I know that,
Oh,
but I'm thinking
that's
it's
right.
the fact that it's not saying the play or the play.
You're right. There is no that. Bad reading on my part. Bad Liza. Bad Liza.
But yeah, because he couldn't face going to watch the play. This is for Greg and any new people in today. That he couldn't face watching a play, in a theatre that it would remind him of Tarlton. It'd be so sad. Though we do question whether Tarlton was particularly associated with that theatre anyway. But possibly was. I have hunted to see what theatres he would have actually played in, and so far I have found nothing. But that doesn't mean he didn't. So maybe this is evidence that he did. Right. Interesting. Yeah. Any general thoughts about that story, or for that matter, the collection as a whole? Anyone want to leap in with it? Anything that they particularly liked there, or disliked? Naughty people. They're all very naughty. I think it's a bit mean that they go to Purgatory because he died. It's not like they killed. It's not like they murdered him. I feel the Purgatory.
They did deceive him though, and made him think that he was in the wrong. So yeah, kind of like a grey area there, really. But
being whipped with nettles, it seems excessive. It seems excessive. And what did he do in the meantime while waiting? Because he's been in Purgatory for a while, waiting for them to arrive. Of course, time doesn't necessarily work that way in Purgatory.
I wonder if it's their punishment or his, since they don't seem particularly bothered by the nettles and they're just like making out forever. And he has to watch them and watch them ignore him while he wears out his arm trying to whip them with nettles. I wonder if it's his punishment.
I think it's all of their punishments, isn't it? They're all just awful people. Yeah.
I don't think she's awful. She didn't want to marry him in the first place.
No. I don't think they're awful. I think the story is brutally unfair to unto the lovers. Actually, I think they all. The man burns his own house down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awkward that. I mean, yeah. Yeah. So yeah.
I've enjoyed this. I mean, I'm sad I wasn't here last night.
Yeah, no, there was some good ones last time. There were again a couple of dodgy ones, but you know, you take the rough with the smooth in the early modern. You know, you take your pleasures where you find them.
It feels like a wonderful sort of very short Canterbury Tales, where there's tales you could really just skip over, but there's ones that are just pure comic joy, and that last one, though it did get a bit excessive, was great fun to read and hear.
I mean, and it is. It's directly from that tradition, and in some cases, that's when I was saying at the beginning. This all sounds awfully familiar. I was going, "Is this a Canterbury Tale I've just forgotten?"
There was mixed. There was ones that it reminded me of, definitely.
So yeah, I'm sure actually with a little research we can narrow down where much of this material comes from. I suspect very little of it is original. That said, it is a piece that upsets some people. I say some people. It upset someone. So there is a retort to the depiction of Tarlton, which we will come to another time. So there is a disagreement as to whether the Tarlton depicted here is the true Tarlton or not. So at some point we will get around to will the real Richard Tarlton stand up, which is a project in progress. We've been looking at the Tarlton jests, which also give another viewpoint of Tarlton, and there's various other elements and elegies about his life, which we will be looking at in a future session. So there's more there. So all that remains really is to just do final thoughts around the room. Liza, do you have anything final you want to throw in?
Well, just that, yeah, I mean, generally, I like these stories. The translation is nice and witty. The prose is sometimes a little bit fancy, but often quite concise, and it feels as though we're being talked to rather than declaimed at, and I like that in prose. I think the intro is the most fascinating part of the whole thing. And I like that Tarleton's punishment is to play jigs forever to the ghosts in hell, in Purgatory, to cheer them up, because they probably need it. And perhaps there is dancing in Purgatory, and if we did this as a show, that's how it would end. I think, with a dance of all the ghosts and the tormentors, and then we could torment the audience. And
yes, Sasha, any final thoughts?
I have to say I loved the journey with this one, and again have to agree that there's so many extremities that you could actually pinpoint a lot of the Canterbury Tales from there. I'm sure I saw the Miller's Tale at one point in there. Kiss my I kissed her ass. I'm sure there was a reference in there somewhere. But I love the fact that it goes from one extreme to the other. And again, I still stand by my point from yesterday. If you were to do this on stage, it would be a very interesting stage, visual and sound experience. So that it was a mixture of physical theatre, bit of film, bit of animation, maybe a bit of mime, maybe a bit of slapstick. But it's a showcase to a lot of different methods you could use on a stage show. I think it would be so much fun to do. And if we ever did anything like this, I'd love to be involved with this, most definitely.
Greg, any final thoughts? You just enjoyed the ride.
Yeah.
It's just a ride. It's just a ride. So all that remains then is to close the session. Thank Alan Scott for helping to wrangle some of the words, and this wonderful room of readers for all their endeavours tonight. And all that remains to say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.